pause your life for a moment and observe it from a distance, like a stranger watching a familiar film. Strip away the emotion. Just look at the structure. The alarm clock's tyranny, the hours traded for security, the rituals that repeat until they feel like a second skin. Now, face the question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Did you build this life brick by brick, or did you simply wake up one day inside a blueprint you never saw being drawn? Because most individuals don't craft their existence, they inherit it. They absorb routines from their surroundings, adopt expectations from their parents, and accept limits from their culture. Then spend decades fiercely defending these borrowed boundaries as if they were their own convictions. This is how the trap is built, not with chains or threats, but with repetition and comfort. You repeat a behavior enough, it hardens into a personality. You follow a path long enough, it becomes a destiny. And by the time you lift your head to look around, you're standing in the middle of a maze you don't remember entering. This is precisely why the majority never escape their own lives. Not for a lack of desire, but because they were never taught to see the machinery running behind their daily choices. Niccolo Machiavelli, a man obsessed with the mechanics of power, recognized a brutal truth about human nature. People don't need to be enslaved by force. Give them a predictable structure, a sense of safety, and a definition of normal, and they will lock themselves inside it. No one has to guard the door because the inmate believes they are free. And once that invisible structure becomes indistinguishable from reality, it's nearly impossible to escape. That is the opponent you are facing. It's not a specific person, a government, or a visible enemy. It's a system that masquerades as reality itself. In this video, we're not going to offer you empty motivation. We're not going to tell you to think positive or believe yourself. That's the linguistic equivalent of wallpaper over a crack. What you're about to experience is built on a single, unforgiving idea. If you can't identify the architecture of the average life, you will spend yours serving it. And the second you identify it, you are forced to make a choice. Stay inside the familiar blueprint, or start dismantling the patterns that were never designed for your evolution. The majority will choose the comfort of familiarity. A handful will choose awareness. Almost none will choose the difficult work of change. So, the only question that matters is, which category will you occupy? Before we begin, if you're ready to challenge the blueprint, drop this in the comments. I see the architecture. Number 1. The average life is an engineered system, not a random outcome. What society calls a normal life isn't a random collection of events. It is a meticulously maintained machine. It is constructed, reinforced, and optimized to keep you exactly where you are. Every day you participate in patterns that seem innocent, waking at the same time, checking the same feeds, driving the same route spot over the years. These patterns weld you into place. You think at a certain volume, you react with predictable emotions, and you move through spaces that subtly confirm your role in the hierarchy. None of it feels like force. That's the genius of the system. It doesn't need to dominate you when it can simply guide you with inertia. Consider how repetition warps perception. The more you perform a task, the less you scrutinize it. What was once a conscious choice devolves into automatic behavior. You stop evaluating the direction of your life because the sheer familiarity of it creates a false sense of certainty. You start to believe that your current location is simply where you belong. That belief is the keystone of the system. Once you accept your position as natural, you stop trying to shift it. The average life endures through loops, not catastrophic failures. It's not one massive mistake that ruins you, it's the tiny, consistent cycles that anchor you. You consume media instead of creating value. You react to emergencies instead of planning strategically. You wait for opportunities instead of positioning yourself for them. These aren't just bad habits, they are stabilizing mechanisms. They prevent movement. They minimize risk. They ensure predictability. And predictability is the ultimate form of control. Here is where it gets insidious. The system convinces you that you are the one choosing this life. It offers you a menu of options inside the box: what to eat, what to watch, what to buy, giving you the illusion of sovereignty while carefully guarding the walls of the box itself. You can pick any flavor of prison as long as you stay inside the walls. Over time, you stop noticing the walls exist at all. Machiavelli noted that it's easier to guide people when they believe they are walking of their own free will. This is exactly how the machine of mediocrity operates. It doesn't need to constrain you overtly. It only needs to shape your habits quietly. When your habits align with the system, your outcomes become predictable. And when your outcomes are predictable, your trajectory is fixed. But a shift occurs the moment you recognize that your life is a system. Suddenly, you stop blaming yourself for bad luck and start analyzing the structure that produced the results. You begin to see patterns instead of isolated events. You notice that certain inputs always yield the same outputs. And once you identify those patterns, you gain something the majority never possess: awareness of the control points. Awareness is the first act of rebellion. Control points are the specific levers where change actually happens. Not through motivation, not through a burst of effort, but through altering the loops that define your behavior. If the system is built on repetition, then disrupting repetition is your first act of resistance. It will feel wrong. It will feel uncomfortable because you are stepping outside a groove that has been carved over years. But that discomfort isn't a warning sign. It's the sensation of the autopilot disengaging. Most people who hear this will nod their heads, feel a spark of insight, and then return to their loops. Because recognizing the architecture is one thing. Acting against it requires a will most have allowed to atrophy. Drop this in the comments. I break the patterns. Number 2. Your behavior is governed by invisible contracts. There are rules shaping your existence that were never written down, never signed, and never explained. No one gave you a handbook. No one sat you down for a lecture. And yet, you obey these rules every day without question. These are invisible contracts. They reside in the background of your awareness, filtering what you believe is possible, acceptable, or too dangerous to attempt. You don't challenge them because they don't appear as restrictions. They appear as common sense. From childhood, you absorb signals about what is realistic for someone like you. You hear whispers about what's too risky, what's too ambitious, and what's not for your kind. These ideas are repeated by family, reinforced by peers, and validated by your environment. Over time, they become internal fences. You begin to police your own desires before anyone else has a chance to object. That is the power of these silent agreements. They remove the need for external supervision because you have become your own warden. Notice how quickly people self-censor to fit expectations. They lower their goals to avoid standing out. They mute their opinions to avoid conflict. They shrink their visions to match what others deem reasonable. There is no law requiring this. No one is holding a gun to their head. Yet the pressure is undeniable because it is social, and social pressure is one of the most potent forces in human psychology. Machiavelli understood that. Groups preserve stability by punishing deviation, not through overt violence, but through subtle friction. When someone steps outside the norm, they are met with skepticism, doubt, or quiet ridicule. This isn't always malicious. Most people aren't consciously trying to hold you back. They are simply defending the familiar reality they have invested in. The danger isn't that these contracts exist. The danger is that you accept them without ever recognizing they are there. You begin to operate within a mental boundary that you didn't construct. You start measuring your potential based on inherited standards, not chosen ones. Once that happens, your behavior becomes predictable again. You don't take certain actions not because you lack the ability, but because you believe you shouldn't. The shift begins when you start identifying these invisible contracts. The moment you recognize a thought as borrowed rather than original, it loses its grip. You start to notice hesitation that stems from perceived judgment, not real limitation. This awareness creates a gap, and in that gap lies your freedom. Breaking these agreements will not feel comfortable. It will feel like you are violating a sacred law. You will encounter resistance from others and from your own conditioning. People may question your sanity. They may try to coax you back to the fold, but that reaction isn't proof you're wrong. It's proof you're no longer operating inside their boundary. When you stop accepting unspoken limits, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability shifts the dynamic. You are no longer a reactive machine. You are acting based on awareness. That is where control returns to the individual. Most people will live inside these contracts, defend them, and hand them down to the next generation. But the few who question them, who step beyond them, they operate on a different plane. Not because they are more talented, but because they are not hobbled by rules they never agreed to. Number 3. Your attention is being systematically extracted. You probably think you waste time. That's the surface-level view. The deeper reality is more surgical. Your time isn't just wasted, it's taken from you in measured increments throughout the day, so each theft feels insignificant. Minutes vanish on one screen. Hours dissolve on another. And by the end of the day, you feel a sense of busy exhaustion but realize you moved no closer to anything you actually want. This is not accidental. It is structured, because if your attention is perpetually occupied, you never step back to ask the big question, where is this life actually going? Look at the architecture of your day. It's not divided by intention, it's fragmented by interruption. Notifications, feeds, passive entertainment, an endless stream designed to keep you engaged but not progressing. You are yanked from one stimulus to the next, never anchoring long enough to build anything substantial. It feels harmless because each moment is small, but these moments aggregate into a pattern. And that pattern determines your destination. The system doesn't need to prevent you from growing. It just needs to keep you so distracted that growth never becomes the priority. This is why so many people are perpetually about to start. They plan, they research, they imagine, but they never execute with consistency because execution requires focus. And focus is being fractured into 1,000 pieces. Machiavelli understood that controlling attention is the most effective form of influence. When your focus is scattered, you become reactive. You respond to whatever appears in front of you instead of directing your own will. And when you live in reaction mode, you are no longer the author of your life. You are a passenger. Here's the truth most people ignore. Time itself is not the variable. Everyone has the same 24 hours. The difference is how those hours are guarded. If your time is open to constant interruption, it will be colonized by external demands. If your attention is unguarded, it will be claimed by whatever is most stimulating, not what is most important. You tell yourself you need rest, that you deserve to relax. And sometimes that's true, but there is a vast gulf between intentional restoration and unconscious consumption. One rebuilds you, the other drains you while pretending to entertain you. The more you rely on distraction, the harder it becomes to focus. Your brain adapts to high stimulation, and anything requiring effort starts to feel unbearable. This is how stagnation becomes normalized. Not through failure, but through a slow disengagement from meaningful action. You stop building because creation feels harder than consumption. You stop thinking deeply because snippets replace analysis. And without realizing it, your direction is being shaped by whatever holds your attention the longest. The shift begins when you treat your attention as a fortress to be defended, not a resource to be casually spent. You start deciding where your focus goes instead of letting it be pulled. You eliminate unnecessary inputs. You create space for depth. And most importantly, you become hyper-aware of when your time is being taken without giving you anything in return. This will feel strange at first. Silence replaces noise. Stillness replaces stimulation. But inside that discomfort is the seat of control. Protect your attention. It is the currency of your life. Because when you reclaim your attention, you reclaim your direction. And once you control your direction, you stop drifting inside a system that profits from your distraction. Most people will never reach this point. They will continue trading their most valuable asset for fleeting engagement, never realizing what they are losing. But the few who recognize it and act on it move differently. Not faster, not louder, but with precision. Drop this in the comments. I guard my time. Number 4. Your environment is writing your thoughts. You believe your decisions spring from your own independent mind. You believe your personality is self-generated. But examine your surroundings closely, and a different picture emerges. The people you talk to, the conversations you overhear, the standards you are exposed to daily, all of these are programming your thinking without asking for consent. Your environment is not passive. It is active. It is constantly whispering what is normal, what is acceptable, and what is possible. You don't need a controller to direct you. They just need to place you inside a certain level of thinking, and over time, you will adapt to it. If everyone around you operates within safe margins, those margins start to feel natural. If no one in your circle challenges ideas or pushes boundaries, then staying put starts to feel reasonable. You adapt quietly, not because you chose to, but because human beings are biologically wired to mirror their surroundings. Notice how standards are set. Not through explicit rules, but through constant exposure. When you are surrounded by people who settle, your own expectations silently lower. When ambition is rare in your tribe, it starts to seem unnecessary. When growth is invisible, stagnation becomes the default. This is how environments construct identity, not by force, but by normalizing a certain level of behavior until it becomes invisible. Machiavelli recognized that proximity is one of the strongest forces of influence. The closer you are to something, the more it shapes you. Not just your actions, but your perception. You begin to view the world through the same lens as those around you. You adopt their fears, their boundaries, their assumptions. Over time, it becomes difficult to distinguish what is truly yours from what you absorbed. Here's the nuance that most people miss. Even well-intentioned people can limit you. Not because they wish you harm, but because they operate within their own boundaries. They may care for you, support you, and to live inside a mindset that keeps everything safe and predictable. And if you stay too close to that influence, you will start to mirror it. You won't realize it's happening because it feels like connection. But in reality, it's alignment. The shift begins when you start auditing your environment with honesty rather than sentiment. You ask the hard questions. Are the people around you expanding your thinking or reinforcing your current position? Are your conversations challenging you or just recycling the same ideas? Are you being exposed to growth, or are you surrounded by comfortable stability that leads nowhere? This isn't about burning bridges. It's about understanding influence. It's about recognizing that access to your mind is powerful. The more someone is present in your world, the more they shape your behavior. And if that influence is limiting, it will quietly define your ceiling. When you take command of your environment, everything changes. You become selective about who you listen to, what you engage with, and where you position yourself. You seek out perspectives that challenge you instead of comfort you. You create distance from patterns that keep you static. Slowly, your thinking expands beyond what once felt normal. This process is not easy. It can feel lonely because when you step outside familiar influence, you lose the comfort of fitting in. But what you gain is clarity. You gain independence in thought. And most importantly, you gain the ability to define your own standard instead of inheriting one. Most people never do this. They stay inside environments that mold them into predictable versions of themselves. But the few who take control of their surroundings stop being designed by the world and start designing themselves. Drop this in the comments. I curate my influence. Number 5. Comfort is a well-disguised prison. Comfort feels innocent. It feels deserved. It feels like a sanctuary. But look closer, and you'll see a different mechanism. Comfort is not just a feeling. It is a position, and that position is designed to keep you immobile. When everything around you is easy, familiar, and soft, you stop pushing. You stop testing your limits. You stop expanding. Not because you made a conscious decision to halt, but because there is no friction demanding you move. This is where most people get trapped. They mistake stability for progress. They believe that because nothing is going wrong, everything must be right. But in a world that is constantly shifting, standing still is not neutral. It is a slow decline. Because while you remain comfortable, others are adapting, learning, and positioning themselves ahead. The gap grows quietly. Comfort erases urgency. It numbs your awareness. When there's no pressure, there's no reason to question your trajectory. You follow the same loops, repeat the same behaviors, and convince yourself that this is enough. But enough is a moving target. And if you aren't moving with it, you are falling behind without realizing it. Machiavelli understood that ease can be more dangerous than struggle. When people become too comfortable, they lower their defenses. They stop preparing. They assume things will continue as they are. And that assumption makes them vulnerable. Not today, not tomorrow, but over time. Because the world doesn't reward those who remain static. It rewards those who evolve. Here's the deeper problem. The longer you stay in comfort, the more resistance you develop toward anything that challenges it. Growth starts to feel threatening. You avoid situations that require effort. You delay actions that demand discipline. You choose what feels good now over what builds strength later. Slowly, your capacity to handle difficulty shrinks. This is how stagnation becomes permanent. Not through a single failure, but through avoidance. You stop stepping into discomfort, so you stop developing the ability to handle it. And without that ability, even minor challenges start to feel overwhelming. You become dependent on ease. And dependence is control. The shift begins when you stop viewing comfort as a reward and start viewing it as a warning sign. You ask yourself where you are too settled, too relaxed, too unchallenged. You identify the areas where you've been on autopilot, and instead of maintaining that state, you deliberately introduce friction. This doesn't mean creating chaos. It means choosing difficulty with purpose. You take on tasks that stretch your abilities. You step into situations that require focus and grit. You remove the safety of constant ease and replace it with calculated challenge. Through that process, your capacity expands again. At first, this will feel unnatural. Your mind will resist, trying to pull you back to the familiar. But that resistance isn't a signal to stop. It's proof you are stepping outside the cage. Because the cage was never locked, it was maintained by your preference for comfort. Most people will never leave it. They will protect their ease, defend their routines, and stay exactly where they are. But the few who challenge it, who choose discomfort strategically, build something others don't. They build resilience, adaptability, and control over their own direction. And once you develop that, comfort no longer controls you. You control when to enter it and when to leave. Number 6. The identity you defend is not your own. The most powerful control system you inhabit is not external. It's internal. It's the version of yourself you believe is fixed. The way you describe your personality, your limits, your strengths, your weaknesses. You say, "This is just who I am." But that statement is almost always a fiction. What you call your identity is often a collection of patterns you absorbed, repeated, and accepted over time. You were shaped long before you had the capacity to question anything by your parents, your peers, your culture. Every time you were praised for a behavior, a trait. Every time you were punished, it pushed you away from another. Slowly, without your consent, you built a self-image not by design, but by accumulation. And once that image formed, you started protecting it. This is where limitation becomes permanent. Because you don't act based on what is possible. You act based on what fits your identity. You filter decisions through it. You reject opportunities that feel not like you. You avoid paths that challenge how you see yourself. Even when a door opens, you hesitate if it doesn't align with your internal narrative. Machiavelli observed that people are consistent not because they choose to be, but because they are attached to their own image. Once someone believes they are a certain type of person, they will behave in ways that confirm it, even if it limits their potential. That is why identity is the ultimate form of self-control. It doesn't need to be enforced from the outside. It is maintained from within. Think about how often people claim they want change but continue acting the same way. They try new habits, new routines, new strategies, but nothing sticks. Not because the methods are wrong, but because their identity hasn't shifted. They are trying to build a different life while still operating as the same person. And that internal conflict always pulls them back. Here is the shift. Real transformation doesn't start with action. It starts with separation. You have to detach from the identity you've been operating under. You have to question it, challenge it, and recognize that it was never a permanent fixture. It was formed, and anything that was formed can be replaced. This is not comfortable because identity feels personal. It feels like you are losing something essential, but what you are actually losing is a limitation that has been repeated so often it feels like truth. Once you see that, you gain the ability to redefine yourself intentionally. Instead of asking, "What do I usually do?" To start asking, "What does this situation require?" Instead of acting based on familiarity, you act based on direction. Stop protecting your current identity and start building one that aligns with where you want to go. This shift changes everything because your actions are no longer restricted by who you were. It doesn't happen overnight. There will be resistance. Old patterns will claw at you. Your mind will seek consistency. But the more you act outside your previous identity, the weaker it becomes. Over time, a new version replaces it, not through affirmations, but through repeated behavior aligned with a different standard. Most people never reach this point. They stay loyal to an identity that limits them. They protect it, defend it, and live inside it without question. But the few who are willing to let it go gain something rare. They gain flexibility. They gain control over who they become. And once you understand that your identity is not fixed, you are no longer trapped by it. Drop this in the comments. I redefine myself. Number 7. The system rewards obedience, not potential. There is a comforting myth that effort and talent are enough to rise above the average, that if you work hard, stay consistent and follow the rules, you will naturally advance. But that myth ignores a fundamental reality. The system you are operating inside was not built to reward independence. It was built to reward stability. And stability depends on predictability, not potential. From the outside, it looks like the ladder is open to anyone. But look closer and you'll see a filter. The people who are most easily accepted are those who follow established paths. They meet expectations. They behave in ways that are understood. They do not disrupt the structure. Because of this, they are allowed to move forward, but only within it, not beyond it. This is where most people are misled. They confuse movement with advancement. They believe they are progressing, but they are simply traveling a predefined route. They are rewarded for fitting in, not for breaking out. And over time, that reward system conditions them to stay aligned with what is expected. Machiavelli observed that systems maintain control by encouraging behavior that supports their structure. When people act predictably, they are easier to manage. When they seek approval, they become easier to guide. And when they depend on validation, they lose the ability to act independently. Consider how often approval dictates decisions. People adjust their behavior to be liked. They avoid actions that might cause rejection. They shape their choices based on how others will respond. Without realizing it, they begin to prioritize acceptance over direction. This is where control becomes internal. Because you are no longer acting based on what is effective. You are acting based on what is approved. Approval is the currency of conformity. The problem isn't that approval exists. The problem is relying on it as a compass, because the system will always favor what maintains order. It will rarely encourage actions that challenge it. So if you depend on validation, you will stay within the boundaries that were set for you. Here is where the shift happens. You stop looking for permission. You stop measuring your actions by how they are received. Instead, you evaluate them by whether they move you forward. That changes your decision-making completely. You become less predictable. You take actions that others hesitate to take. You stop aligning your behavior with what is comfortable for everyone else. This doesn't mean acting recklessly. It means acting independently. It means understanding that approval is often a reflection of conformity, not effectiveness. And once you see that clearly, you stop chasing it. There will be resistance. When you step outside expected behavior, people will question you. They may doubt your decisions. They may try to pull you back into alignment, not because they are against you, but because you are no longer predictable. And unpredictability creates discomfort in structured environments. But that discomfort is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that you are no longer operating under the old rules. You are no longer waiting to be guided. You are making decisions based on direction, not approval. Most people will never reach this point. They will continue to seek validation, follow established paths, and remain inside the system that rewards their obedience. But the few who break away from that pattern, the few who act without needing approval, move differently. They are not limited by the same expectations. And once you stop seeking permission, you stop being controlled by those who give it. Drop this in the comments. I need no approval. Now you see it clearly. Not as a concept, not as motivation, but as a structure that has been shaping your existence without asking for permission. The patterns, the limits, the distractions, the identity, the environment all working in concert to keep you in a position that feels normal but was never truly chosen. Most people will hear this, feel a moment of clarity, and then return to their routine as if nothing happened. Because awareness creates discomfort, and comfort always tries to pull you back. That is how the system survives, not through force but through repetition. Machiavelli never focused on fairness. He focused on advantage. And advantage does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to the one who sees what others ignore and acts on it without hesitation. That is the difference. Not knowledge alone, but execution. Because once you see the architecture, you are no longer allowed to pretend you don't understand it. At this point, you have two options. You can go back to what is familiar, stay inside the same loops and continue living a life that was shaped for you. Or you can start cutting away what limits you. Change how you spend your time. Change who you allow around you. Change the identity you've been protecting. And most importantly, stop waiting for approval from a system that benefits from your obedience. If this shifted your perspective even slightly, don't just watch and move on. Hit the like button, share this with someone who is still stuck inside the same patterns, and subscribe to Winds of Thought if you want more content that exposes how power actually operates beneath the surface. Because this is not about motivation. This is about seeing clearly and acting with intention. Most people will stay where they are. A few will start questioning, and a very small number will act.